My name is Crystal Lynese Walker, and I have kind of two roles. My main role is serving as a senior director for a nonprofit organization, MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And I run the Racial Equity at Work initiative, which are we have two programs, Black Equity at Work, as well as Hispanic Equity at Work, that just launched last week. But we developed the first ever programs that help hold partners, companies, employers across this country accountable for racial equity by setting real targets, by not having a hosh-posh, everybody says they're doing a great job, but providing them with support to actually kind of hold themselves accountable to the commitments that we've seen in the past. But my passion work, which is perfect, I actually run my own passion consulting firm. And it's me doing work that I love with clients based on my passions, and what I'm interested in and how I can be of help. And there I focus on racial equity in the workplace as well, but I look at it through a lens of making sure that Black women are at the center of those conversations and that their voices are heard, but more importantly, that their needs are met. And even that work is an act of rebellion, because there's this idea that we need to focus on others and that will somehow trickle down to everyone else. But what we know historically, what we know in our hearts for those of us who experience this as Black women, we know that when Black women are the focus, everybody else around us benefits, oftentimes at our own detriment or at the slower pace of our own benefit. And that is why that's important for me to center that. To talk about an act of rebellion, it really reminds me of a story I've shared before. I grew up in North Carolina in the rural South. I loved where I grew up. I had a great family, lots of aunts, uncles, mom, dad, siblings. And my mother was a teacher assistant, and she taught at this elementary school, the elementary school I attended. And of course, I started kindergarten a little bit ahead because I had a mother who made me read over the summer and do flashcards, right? Everyone else was playing in the mud. I had to do that before I could go play in the mud. And so when I started kindergarten, I was reading more than most kindergarteners coming in. And what would often happen was that I would become bored. Whatever sheet, whatever activity, I was done in a few moments. And oftentimes I would try to go help my classmates. But what would happen instead was that I was told that I was being distracting or that I wasn't the teacher and I needed to sit down. And so I spent a lot of kindergarten in the corner or out in the hallway. So much to the point where there were times that my mom would walk by because she's teaches there. And I would say, Mom, I'm out in the hallway again. And she would just walk by me like she didn't see me at that point. But where that all came to a head was that, and this was back when there were different ways that we tried to praise kids and tried to give them encouragement. But they used to keep track of our reading level and like how many books we had read and what we were doing. And we all had a tiger. And the tiger was in the hallway. So of course, now that I think about that, that's mortifying for every kid to have a tiger. And that tiger was moving to a finish line of growth. And so like everyone knew where your growth. But for me, I saw it as a marker because my little tiger was in the front. And so I knew that across the entire kindergarten that I had been reading the most books, right, and doing those activities. And when we got to the end of the school year, my mother was getting dressed to go to an award ceremony for the kids. And I said, well, I should be getting the reading award. We've been talking about whoever's in the front wins. And my mom said, well, you're not getting that award. Someone else from the kindergarten class is getting it. And I was so upset because it did not make sense to me how I could be told for a whole school year that whoever's in the front gets this big award. And I'm like, well, my cub is in the front. That should be me. My mother tried to convince me not to go. I went anyway. And we kind of stood in the back, and I watched the person who was called. She was in my class. She was not a student of color. She was a young white girl. And the teacher ultimately decided that because I spent time in the corner or out in the hallway, that diminished what I had done academically, when the criteria the entire time was only about what you did academically. And I remember my mother having to tell me something. And it was at that moment I realized that I had to do something different. And she said that you're Black, you're a girl, and we don't have money and wealth. And so you're going to have to work 3 times harder than everyone else. You're going to have to put in 3 times as much work. She said, but I unfortunately have to tell you, you're also going to have to expect half the recognition when you do put in the work. And I remember being angry about that. And so at that point for me, I knew that wasn't something that I was going to be willing to accept. And that if I put in 3 times the work, I was going to get all the recognition that came with it. And that I was going to do that by any means necessary, even if that meant telling my teacher, no, this is exactly what it needed to be. And so that was really my first introduction to being rebellious. And it has most certainly followed me all of my days, as my grandmother would tell me.